Joining me now is Bharti Chaturvedi of the Chintan Environmental Research and Action Group. We have Vimlendu Jha, known environmentalist. Bharti, when private buses openly flout pollution norms, while citizens are complying with and they are shifting to BS6 vehicles, doesn't this really expose double standard in enforcement?
Well, actually, to me, the real challenge is that we don't have public transport because only those citizens who can actually afford vehicles, and many of our citizens cannot afford any kind of private vehicle, and they have to walk, they have to cycle, they have to use two-wheelers. A colleague of mine has just a part of Chintan has just had a terrible head injury yesterday just because he was hit. And so people, I don't believe that that's the hypocrisy is that we don't have public transport. So citizens have to get hit, injured, and it's absolutely tragic. It's the hypocrisy is not about those people who use better quality cars. The hypocrisy is about the average person who cannot for so many years. It's not about 1 year. It's about several years since the
Yes.
Commonwealth Games. We don't have public transport. Let's not compare the wrong things. Let's compare public transport. And since 2010, we've had a huge shortage of buses, and nobody's ever bothered for the last 15 years to get more buses and save the city and help people be more, move people instead of moving cars.
Okay. Vimlendu, Asting clearly shows that the PUC certificates are being sold like a candy. How does this directly impact Delhi's air quality, and are we underestimating the role of vehicular pollution in this emergency, the air emergency situation that we are currently in?
So, Maria, not at all. In fact, the reality is that the road transport minister or the transport minister of the country has accepted that vehicular pollution actually contributes almost 40%. Because before that, if you look at last several weeks, the government actually denied this any statistics that was proposed or forwarded by people like us, as in stubble burning one day. Of course, before that there was no pollution and so on and so forth. And I've always said that PUC is something we imagine that the only thing that the government has actually done in last 1 week in the name of governance vis-a-vis air quality is making PUC stricter and saying if you have a PUC certificate, that's when you can actually get fuel. And when you know that the PUC regime is so corrupt, first of all the PUC vehicles, I'm sure you live in Delhi NCR as well, PUC vehicles themselves don't have any PUC of their own, as they're dilapidated 30, 40-year-old Omni vans in that sense. And that cannot be a parameter. One is that I haven't come across any person in Delhi NCR whose car hasn't passed the PUC certificate test in that sense. So if you have a 100% result of PUC, when you know that you can anyway get it, so it's just a check mark in that sense of that your vehicle actually has PUC. But pollution under control cannot just be based on one regime. Pollution under control, as Bharti said, that when we know that private vehicles are the main contributors of pollution, when we know that vehicular sector or transport sector is the 40% culprit of this, then you have to do more, much more than for a minister to just accept as in what is he? He's in power. He can't just make a sorry face and say, oh, well, I pollute. If you pollute, you better clean and make that cleaning process immediate. Your personal health is of no relevance to me or anyone who's living in Delhi. Just because you fall unwell, here people are dying, and your cough and your irritation of throat is of no relevance and significance to people like us.
Okay, Bharti, then how dangerous is it if pollution certificates themselves become corrupt, pay and get system?
Well, first of all, you probably read the CAG report earlier this year, which said over 1 lakh vehicles were not meeting standards and they got PUCs. And the other point is that I'm very skeptic of PUCs because, first of all, there are many ways to fudge it. You don't even have to measure it properly and you can fudge it. But secondly, they don't measure the range they have of pollutants. And science has overtaken that PUC framework. We know now that PUCs cannot measure a large amount of the pollutants. They just look at certain pollutants from like smoke, basically from the tailpipe, and that's just not enough. So even if it was an honest regime and many cars were getting rejected till they were improved, I still think it is an absolute, it's not going to solve the problem. We want to know two things, and one of them is how many people, how many tests, what percentage and how many cars failed. That is of interest to
None.
me, not how many people got it. And I think the other point is, if you fail, we don't have a backup because we don't fail anybody. You should get a week, to go fix your vehicle and come back. Otherwise, no fuel and you're off the road. It's possible to do. We're a very digital database for vehicles.
Okay.
So I'm interested in some kind of completely revamped technology, if at all, for PUC. And in any case, till then, I want to see who failed.
Okay.
I think that's very important.
Okay, so, Vimlendu, the question will be, citizens are often blamed for pollution. But here is a system which is completely compromised. Then how much responsibility can realistically be placed on the public?
It's not an individual problem. It's a public problem. And at the end of the day, if the public transport is missing from the entire city's governance, and be it in Delhi or Gurgaon or Noida, you and I can't buy a bus and put it out there. As if there's 3,000 to 4,000 bus deficit alone that we have in Delhi, and zero electric vehicle or percolation of public transport in Gurgaon and Noida and Faridabad and many of these areas, that can't be an individual's responsibility. If the coal thermal power plants are not following the emission standards, or waste to energy plants are not following any standard, forget about just sulfur dioxide standard in that sense, that can't be your responsibility and my responsibility. So, this entire lazy governance and putting the onus on individual behavior and behavioral change, this is not a conference, this is not an awareness workshop in a school that we're dealing with where everyone needs to be sensitized. We're not talking about sensitization, we're talking about, heaven's sake, our breathing rights and domain which lies completely with the government. The fixing of public transport, the fixing of construction and demolition and roadside dust, as in I can't go and create pavements everywhere, or for that matter, destruction and protection of Aravalis, or the coal thermal power plants that don't follow the sulfur dioxide and other norms, or for that matter, the stubble burning that is actually taking place, which is not just an individual responsibility, which is linked to water and air governance in that sense. All of that, and therefore, to squarely put it on the middle class, as in, I always blame the middle class for their behavior and for their convenient narrative in terms of buying an air purifier rather than shouting and protesting or asking for, because you can always buy a solution. But when we're talking about the masses, then you'll have to look at mass solution and you have to look at public solution, and you can't put the onus squarely on an individual. At the end of the day, I'm a proponent and advocate of the issue that why should people even buy private vehicles? Why shouldn't there be congestion charges? Why shouldn't there be extra parking charges? Why can't public transport be affordable for
Vimlendu
first
and
mile,
Bharti,
last
stay
mile,
with us,
and safe?
because there is another report that I want to play on the show tonight. When we say rules in Delhi NCR exist only on paper, it's not an exaggeration, viewers. Here's another example of pollution norms being openly ignored. While citizens like you and me make the effort to switch to cleaner BS6 vehicles, private buses violate every possible government regulation, and we have caught them on camera. Here's that shocking reality.
Delhi has become a gas chamber.
Stage 4 of the Graded Response Action Plan against pollution was in force till today.
But on the ground, almost every rule is being violated openly. This is the Delhi-Noida border, and what you see here is not an isolated violation but an open operation of illegal buses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and several more diesel buses lined up. Despite a ban on vehicles not meeting BS6 emission norms, these buses are openly picking up passengers, making multiple stops and preparing to leave Delhi. All of this is happening right under the watch of the Delhi Traffic Police, Transport Department, local police, the MCD and other enforcement agencies. For over 15 minutes, they remain parked in a long queue, waiting for the Noida entry to open at 9 p.m. before exiting the capital. Take a closer look at this bus. Registration number UP22 800875. Parked in northeast Delhi. It is a diesel, Euro 3 or BS3 vehicle clearly banned under current norms. Instead of being seized, heavy luggage is being loaded and the bus is allowed to operate, adding directly to Delhi's air pollution.
कौन सी है बस? डीजल है या सीएनजी है? डीजल है सीएनजी है? डीजल है। अच्छा ये बताओ, डीजल है, BS3 है तुम्हारी बस, मैंने कागज चेक किए हैं इसके। 8 साल पुरानी गाड़ी है।
ये सर मुझे नहीं पता, ये उन्हें पता होगी।
Yet another UP38 802453 operating between Delhi and Sambhal. A 2017 diesel bus running without a valid Delhi permit.
परमिट है दिल्ली में चलने का? है
ना।
कैसे चला रहे हो फिर से?
ऐसे ही चलाना है, दे लेके।
भाई कुछ नहीं कहता।
BS6 norms have been enforced since 2020. In Delhi, BS3 and BS4 diesel vehicles are banned. But on the ground, the reality is very different. These buses ply daily through different parts of the capital. Now look at another bus. Registration number UP17 804707. Its condition itself raises questions about its fitness. A diesel bus carrying passengers despite clear restrictions.
डीजल की गाड़ी है ये? तुम डीजल की गाड़ी दिल्ली में चला रहे हो?
खड़ी भैया, चला नहीं रहे, लेके जाएंगे अपने घर के लिए।
कैसे लेके जाओगे?
कैसे लेके जाओगे?
चला के लेके जाओगे ना।
अब तक तो चल रही थी गाड़ियाँ।
कब तक चल रही थी?
आज से जब जैसे मान लो मना कर दिया डीजल गाड़ियाँ दिल्ली में नहीं आएंगी, तो अब फिर खड़ी हो जाएंगी जाकर।
पिछले 3 दिन से नहीं चल रही हैं।
हमने तो आज जैसे देखा न्यूज़ में, जो है देख रहे हैं न्यूज़ में, मना करा नहीं चल रही।
Bus after bus, unauthorized and polluting, operating freely, exposing serious gaps in GRAP for enforcement. The rules are clear. The violations are visible. The question is, who is allowing this? With Nitin Jain in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Vimlendu and Bharti continue to be with us. Bharti, private buses are high mileage and high emission vehicles. If they are allowed to violate norms and be effectively, undoing the gains which perhaps cleaner private vehicles are ensuring. Isn't it correct?
Well, I mean, I don't know why we're not stopping them, because what is happening at our borders? Because we stop everybody for long queues to collect various forms of taxations. We've all stood on those queues. But I don't know why we don't stop people to and come up with a kind of a better RFID style system to do all this. Obviously, we've got to make those relationships with states like UP. We've got to, be in this together. We're part of the same airshed. So, we have to breathe each other's emissions and pollutants. I think we have to learn to find a new model of cooperation. And as far as I can see, there seems to be cooperation more with the actors who should be stopping these buses and the bus drivers than in the public interest.
Vimlendu, your final thoughts?
I think, anyway, GRAP is not supposed to be a governance measure. It is only preemptive. It is only supposed to be precautionary in that sense. And imagine that little in the name of air quality governance in the last few years that we've seen, that the government only depends on GRAP. And even that is not followed. That totally talks about the inability of the government or the lack of political will. The government can collect taxes. It doesn't fail. They are bouncers on borders to collect MCD taxes, but they don't have anybody to actually look at the pollution norms and these certificates at all. So, I think the root cause of all of this is that the government is not interested. As I always say, three things with regard to air pollution. One is that we live in denial. Second, we only look at these band-aid solutions in terms of temporary measures. And third is that we keep it only Delhi-centric. One is that imagine, why should this ban only be about entering Delhi? As in I was in Noida a couple of days ago. Noida's air doesn't need a visa. or any permission in that sense, and therefore it's the same airshed as Bharti rightly said.
And in fact,
so
it's
therefore,
worse.
The pollution norms, pollution,
Noida, Greater
airs
Noida is worse.
Well,
worse, and
Ghaziabad
therefore,
is the
and
worst
I
in
always
Yes,
say that
Ghaziabad
disproportionately, why
yes.
do we always blame Rekha Gupta alone? As in, at the end of the day, no one, not a single news channel has asked questions of Yogi Adityanath, or I don't even know who my chief minister is, because these days I live in Gurgaon mostly in that sense. So we need to understand that entire airshed approach, common governance approach, uniformity in governance, and also long-term systemic changes. As in, I'm saying that if PUC norms, if checks and balances norms, if the fuel norms, all of that has to be found and followed.
And
It
in fact,
has to be
Vimlendu,
for the entire
when I
airshed.
asked the environment minister this question of the AQI levels and of a particular date where he had informed the parliament then in Rajya Sabha, he did try and explain to me that it was then and it is not a Delhi-centric problem. But the fact
No, of
is
course
that
he
most
did.
of the
Of course he
neighboring
did.
states are now
And
governed
too
by
early,
the
Maria, for him
BJP.
to say that India had Delhi had not reached 450, and imagine after that interview of yours and his submissions in the parliament, after 2 days, on the 15th of December, the AQI was 460, 470, 480 in their monitors, and it was 800 plus in private monitors. In fact, look at the knee-jerk governance system. Sirsa, GRAP 4 has been removed today. Why? Because the stronger wind. And saying that some air quality monitors in Delhi were showing 145 AQI, where I was just checking right now that it was actually 350, 370. Your news story is also talking about. So there's no seriousness. They don't.
Okay.
Somewhere they're not able to understand the correlation between pollution and death. Why can't they accept it?
No,
Or
that
Aravali and
is not being
pollution.
accepted certainly by the government. Vimlendu Jha and Bharti, really appreciate your time.